Okay, model number 5 then. I've incorporated, it's just a standalone model this, I haven't got the opposing model for it. I've incorporated this because this one's got a bounded saddle and a free end saddle, so I just thought it was good in that it allows us to use both rules, if you like. So here we've got a large free end saddle which extends from the canine back. Again, where possible, limit the occlusal table. So this is our mucosa supported portion of the denture, and then we've got another saddle area here where we've got a missing premolar, so we can just outline that one as well. And then there's a missing tooth here, but this certainly isn't, well, it's not big enough to fit a saddle area in anyway. I think this is probably a 7 that's drifted and occupied the space where the 6 was. So we wouldn't incorporate a saddle area just here. So this is what we're working with. So to provide support now then for this denture, support comes from the footprint of the denture here, and then on the abutment tooth we're going to want a cingulum rest on that canine, which hopefully extends around to the mesial aspect as much as possible. If this was a premolar, we'd just have metalwork just on the mesial, wouldn't we? But here we probably want the cingulum rest, which comes round onto the mesial aspect of the tooth. Here we've got a bounded saddle, so again we want an occlusal rest each side of the saddle area, and then when we look at this pattern of tooth loss, really we're going to want some support right here at the back. And we see we've got this 7 which is quite rotated. It might be an idea to put the occlusal rest here on the mesial aspect where it's easy to access. So I'm going to cross these 2 teeth out and suggest on the diagram that this one's a 6, just to make the diagram simple. And the occlusal rest is going to sit about that portion, about there, isn't it? This is a case really where you'd probably want to draw the design on the model. So there's our support. Now, by following our rules, I've probably got an additional or an unnecessary occlusal rest here, which we could delete later when we get to the decluttering stage. Remember, on the end of the system we've got indirect retention, then declutter and note preparation work, so we might delete that off. So there's our support. Next thing we want is retention. So we're back on the surveyor now, surveying this tooth, this tooth, this tooth and this tooth to look whether we want to create a path of insertion that's different to the path of displacement, and whether we've got appropriate undercut for clasping. Well, we've certainly got a undercut for clasping on these 2 teeth and this one, so that's what I'd aim for to start with. So gingerly approaching clasp here, here on the 2 canines, and then on this tooth there's some nice undercut around here, so we can bring a gingerly an occlusally approaching clasp around the tooth and engage the undercut on the buccal aspect here. Okay, so once we've got our clasps on, we can think about path of insertion. Again, with this one, I'd make the path of insertion equal the path of displacement, keep it simple. There's not a great deal of undercut distal to these canines to engage, so I'll just leave it as it is. Wherever we've got a clasp tip, we need reciprocation, so we need to incorporate our reciprocation into these cingulum rests by the rest seat preparation that we cut. And then with this occlusally approaching clasp here, we'd incorporate our reciprocation into this part of the clasp arm here. We now need to connect it all up. So at the front here, I would finish the full plate that we're going to design into a convenient fold between the canines, and the back we want to make this plate as big as possible. So you can see on the model here, we're coming right across the post down, and then we're going to need to bring the metalwork up and connect into this occlusal rest. So again, this is probably a case where you want to draw the design on the model. I'd be looking at doing something like this and coming up like so with our metalwork. Looks a bit exaggerated on the on the paper. And then I'd be inclined to try and keep this tooth free from metalwork and bring my metalwork around with an open portion just here to try and keep the design as hygienic as possible. And again, full palette design to improve retention and support for this free end saddle. Can we incorporate indirect retention? Well, if we've got our saddle area here, and we've got a clasp tip here and a clasp tip here, when we go to rotate, we're rotating about our pencil in this direction. So this cingulum rest would by default work as indirect retention. So we're all right at that point there. And then the final stage, noting your prep work, rest seats, I'd probably consider deleting this occlusal rest off, or we can leave it there and have sort of a belt and braces kind of approach. Okay, so that's number 5. If you were going to do a mucosa borne denture for model number 5, working through the same procedure again, we would have a large footprint like so. This would be our saddle area. This time the acrylic work, when we're thinking of support, wants to come up onto the abutment teeth to above the survey line, so just onto those canines, whoops, something like that. And then on this side of the arch, we'd probably want to come around both of these abutment teeth up to and above the survey line with our acrylic. Again, I'll just draw it onto that 6 to make it a bit easier to see. And then again, nice big footprint to the denture. And we can incorporate clasps and consider the path of insertion just like we did for the tooth-borne denture. Put a clasp around this tooth. We draw these squiggles just to show that they're wrought wire clasps going into an acrylic base. Okay, so that's about it for that one. Everything else is the same kind of consideration really. Okay, so that's model number 5.